Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today on this Tuesday. Dave Revs and Dave Wanstead with you. We are a week away from the first CFP rankings. Always interesting to get a sense for what the committee thinks of the Big Ten teams, and we're going to give our thoughts on it today.
Well, I'm going to give a thought right now. Michigan. I mean, I've been obviously Ohio State, Penn State, but to me, Michigan right now is the best team. They should be number one next week.
There's a case to be made, for sure. I mean, you look at scoring margin, you look at the way they have dominated their opponents. Absolutely. I think you could also say, as Pat Forty joins us from Louisville, there is a case to be made as well, Pat, for Ohio State. You got a chance to see them in person this past weekend. I mean, you talk about really good resume. They've now beaten Notre Dame and beaten Penn State.
Exactly. Two really high-quality wins, big-time settings, came through when they had to, and that's really the only other team that has two wins of that caliber is Florida State, and I think Ohio State is showing what it's made of steadily as this season's going along.
We'll dive a little more into both those teams as well as Penn State. It is the focal point of our big story. Those CFP rankings come out a week from today. Here's how the AP poll stacks up the contenders. Two-time defending champ Georgia is still number one. Michigan State's at number two, 19 first-place votes. Ohio State's been getting at least one first-place vote ever since they beat Notre Dame. They got three after the win over Penn State. The Nittany Lions are ninth. So did want to dive in, as I said, to anticipate kind of where you think the committee will place these teams, kind of the pros and cons with each one of them. Let's start with Michigan. You already heard Coach Wanstead make a little bit of his point there on the Wolverines, Pat. Where do you stand with Michigan and how you think the committee might view them?
Michigan's a dichotomy to me because I think look test, best team, most dominant, most well-rounded, good at everything, no weaknesses that I've seen, no close scrapes. They have just totally taken care of business. The other hand, still haven't played anybody, and I do think the committee, certainly early on, will want to send a bit of a message about what you've played so far. So I think that could hold Michigan back. The third factor, the human factor, is there a little bit of anger, resentment maybe about some of the off-the-field smoke around Michigan? These are human beings that are going to sit in that committee room. Will they hold that against them? I don't know. I think ultimately no, but there's going to be some discussions about it along the way.
Yeah, I would hope on that last point that Pat made, how the committee members view some of the off-the-field issues with Michigan. I look at this as a real positive, why I like this team an awful lot, because and you've heard me say the expression, hey, the quickest way to be defeated is to be distracted. Well, this football team, from one, having your head coach suspended, and now this on top of it, and when you combine those things off the field, but yet people are talking about them, and the players are reading them, and the coaches are reading the stories and having to comment on it, and they're still winning like this, that is a real credit to this football team, from Jim Harbaugh and the assistant coaches, players on down. And you mentioned the players, to win a championship, and I've been very fortunate to be on a couple of them, your stars need to play like stars. That's how you win a championship. You can win a game without those guys playing at a high level, but not a championship. And when you look at J.J. McCarthy, I mean, the guy right now could win the Heisman. Blake Corum, he just doesn't get enough carries. Last week we talked about him. He was my offensive player midway through of scoring touchdown. Number one scoring defense in the country. I mean, this is what teams have to do to win. They're doing it all, and they're not being distracted. It's amazing. It really is.
Leading the nation in scoring margin, more than 35 points per game. And, yeah, you're talking about kind of everything that's swirling around them. And this is the second time we've kind of seen that with this team this year, and turned in maybe their most complete performance, although there are, I'd say, several of them on that list. But the game against Michigan State was just an absolute thorough domination of a team that was really fired up to have a shot at beating them.
And I've been involved in these rivalry games before, and even though Michigan State was the underdog, the game was up there. And hey, Rever, and you and Pat, we've all seen crazy things happen in this Michigan State rivalry game, particularly when it's on the road. Didn't happen with this football team.
No, Michigan is locked in. They absolutely are. And Coach, you mentioned J.J. McCarthy, and a couple of years ago when I was up talking to Jim Harbaugh in his office, it was McCarthy's freshman year, and he and Donovan Edwards has actually made a habit of after they got back from road games, the team traveled back, they would go to the indoor facility and Edwards would run routes and McCarthy would throw balls to him. It might be 2 in the morning, might be 3 in the morning, but that's how much they wanted to play. That's how much they were working on honing their craft. And I think we're seeing that from J.J. McCarthy right now in terms of a guy who has progressed and gotten better and better and better and is really at the top of his game. He's been awfully impressive this season.
They have all the data is in for them that the committee will consider because they have a bye this week. So we'll see what happens a week from now and get a sense of how the committee views what is a really complete team. Let's focus on Ohio State. I kind of said earlier, Pat obviously saw him in person this week, and I'm interested to get his impressions. But if you're just looking at the quality of wins,
right?
Again, he made the point on Florida State, and I think it's a fair point to make. But in that discussion, is Ohio State going to go on the road and beat Notre Dame, to beat Penn State, in a game that they certainly had well in hand by the fourth quarter? I'd say the final score a little deceptive because Penn State got the late touchdown. But Ohio State, even though they're winning differently than they have in past years, they're not going to overwhelm you necessarily with the offense. But, man, the defense is really good, and they haven't been making mistakes offensively.
No, they haven't. And Kyle McCord, their quarterback, I mean, 12 touchdowns, 1 interception. I mean, outstanding. And they've had a core. I mean, last week, Burke, Henderson, Ibuka, these guys didn't play. I mean, and these guys are all first or second round draft picks. I mean, it's not less like having a player that is finishing his college career. These guys are going to be playing for a bunch of years in the NFL. They weren't on the field. Ryan Day is doing a fantastic job, with this football team. And I kind of like where they're at. I mean, I think it's okay that the defense is being dominant. I mean, when you go out and recruit, you're trying to get the best football players you can get and develop them. I think that's showing up right now. And the thing that Ryan is not afraid to do, and those 2 wins, you're right, beating 2 top 10 wins. I mean, Notre Dame was 7 at the time they beat them, and obviously we know, or 9, and Penn State was 7 or whatever they were. 2 top 10 teams. And to do it and not be afraid to run the ball. Ohio State ran the football 41 times against Penn State. I love that. That tells me, okay, Ryan Day, big picture head coach. We're making it. We got enough points here. We're playing really good defense. We don't want to turn the football over. Most offensive coaches, they would just keep wailing it. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it's the sack, it's the fumble, it's this. I mean, he understands what it takes from a head coach's perspective, which is critical. What do we got to do as a team? Yes, I'm going to call the plays. I'm running the offense. But my job is head coach, big picture. What do we do in special teams, defense, offense? Do I got to throw it 40 times to win this game? No, I can run it. So that's a real plus for them.
Yeah, I agree completely there, Dave. I mean, I think that this is a very impressive coaching job by Ryan Day because I think his preference would be to let it rip 40 times a game with the quarterback and be the wide open offensive show. But that's not what this team is built for. And so to be able to win different ways with different personnel and what your strengths are, I think shows a real acumen as a coach. And the defense is outstanding. JT on one end, Jack Sawyer on the other, Tommy Eichenberg in the middle. Those are 3 great players there. Secondary has played, I think, maybe even above expectation, especially with Denzel Burks out, as you said. They dominated Penn State's offense. They gave them really no hope of winning that game. And then offensively, yeah, hey, we're just going to give the ball to Mayan Williams. We're going to not ask Kyle McCord to do too much. And then we got number 18 out there, Marvin Harrison, and he can make us look real good when we need him to. I mean, he was so good in that game as he has been when they've been able to get him the ball. Special talent, and the kind of guy, when they do bring back Travion Henderson, when they do bring back Ibuka, it's going to open up the field more for the whole offense.
That's pretty amazing, too. I mean, you could argue the last 2 games, that game and the Purdue game, are the 2 best games they played all year. Certainly Notre Dame was a really impressive win. But to do it when they're banged up, I think the committee's going to be really impressed. Now, again, you got to go into Wisconsin this week. That's not going to be easy. But if you win that game, another feather in your cap as well. So we'll
Absolutely.
see how they are treated. You mentioned Penn State, Pat. You saw them in person. I think the narrative is pretty clear on this team. They are a team that is really good defensively, and they seem to be somewhat limited offensively. They still have the opportunity out there against Michigan and a chance to change that narrative. But right now, how do you see the committee viewing them?
Yeah, I think that they are a good one-loss team, but there's a clear ceiling on where you put them. I think you would put them as a one-loss team behind Texas, behind Oregon, behind Alabama probably, because they just haven't beaten enough good teams. This was their big shot, and they came up really lacking there. Very disappointing performance, I thought, from Penn State. And you know how badly it hurt him. I did feel for Drew Aller. They brought him into the post-game press conference. 2 questions in, he started tearing up. He didn't want to cry in front of everybody. He cried, and you just know how much it hurt because he did not perform well, and his receivers didn't get open. They just weren't in sync offensively. And if they can't improve the offense before they play Michigan, then the same thing's probably going to happen there. So Penn State still has some holes on the resume, some holes in their overall attack, and that's going to keep them, I think, down certainly outside of the top 6 toward the end of the top 10 when the CFP committee puts it together next week.
Yeah, I agree. Pat mentioned the receiver thing. To me, that was the glaring thing that they couldn't come up with the big play. I just kept, and then because you know how well James Franklin's recruited, as good as anybody in the country, but we didn't see that receiver that, we really haven't seen it all year that we talk about, that's become a household name like other positions on that football team.
Right.
That, and then the other thing too is running the football. I believe I was so excited. I was waiting to see Singleton and to see Allen and see these guys run the ball and make a difference. They had 12 carries. One team runs it for as close a game as it was, down to the end. And one team runs it 14 times, or 41 times, and the other one runs it, 18, less than 20 times. I mean, I thought that was a little bit out of sync. They might have gotten away from the run game a little bit. And lastly, and maybe as important, let me tell you, this is a big game, and we know top 10 teams and all the stuff they're talking about with James Franklin. Players bounce back in tough losses like this. Pat was mentioning the quarterback, Drew, being worked up after the game. Players bounce back a lot quicker, Rever, than coaches do. And the biggest challenge this week, the way I see it, is James Franklin coming in there Monday or Sunday with his players and his coaches and saying, okay, let's go. You know what I mean? We still control our own destiny. We can beat everybody on the schedule. Let's go, let's go. It's behind us. So this will be a tough week, too, for James Franklin personally as the head coach to make sure his team and coaches are back.
And people do kind of laugh a little bit at the tweets where Indiana, or whatever it is, whoever the opponent is. But this is where that helps you.
Yep.
This is where that helps you, that you can come in and you say, hey, just like every week, whether we win or lose, we're wiping the slate clean. We're going to move on to the next opponent. But the Michigan game clearly takes on huge import for them if they're going to have any chance at all of being in this discussion down the stretch. For our big stats and for the second straight season, the Michigan State Spartans captured the Big Ten regular season women's soccer crown co-champs this year with Nebraska. Pretty remarkable for a program that had never won the title before last season. They are the top seed in the Big Ten tourney. They'll kick things off against 8th-seeded Iowa Sunday in East Lansing, a team they beat to clinch the title on Sunday. And in what is becoming an annual occurrence this time of year, our big interview is Jeff Hosler, the head coach of Michigan State. And Jeff, I was looking back on my notes. Do you realize it was literally 1 year ago today that we had you on, October 24th of 2022. So we have you on again exactly 1 year later. How does the second title compare to the first?
Yeah, well, Dave, we've been celebrating this anniversary, all morning long. It's been on the calendar. So lots of celebrations going on here this weekend. Obviously, so thrilled for this group to do what they've done with so much changeover in our roster from so many elite players graduating last year and bringing in a whole new group with half our teams new to our roster this year between our 10 freshmen and 5 transfers. So thrilled to be able to put together the season that we did in such an incredible conference that I think is the strongest across the top to bottom across all Power Fives here in America.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like looking at this a couple of weeks ago, it felt like maybe you weren't going to be the ones who would claim the title. Penn State was in a really good spot. They faltered a little bit down the stretch, and then you guys have really played your best soccer here lately, unbeaten in your last 5 matches. What's been the message to your team as you kind of chase this title here, all the while keeping an eye, at least a little bit, I would think, on what was happening elsewhere?
Yeah, I give our players a ton of credit. I mean, to their success last year, it's been a similar story this season. We're just really trying to get them to focus on what we're doing, look internal, focus on the process, and be where our feet are every day. Look, if you focus on trying to go win games as opposed to being your best each day and being best in your performance, then I think some game anxiety will creep in. You start to pay attention to those situations that you're outlining across the league. And so they did a really good job of narrowing their focus internally to us and what we need to do strategically against opponents each time out. And when they did that successfully, we got the 3 points we would need to continue to climb. And look, it's a 10-game schedule. I mean, everyone has to play the 10 games. Our setback came earlier in the season, whereas our opponents maybe came later.
Jeff, I mentioned this when we spoke last year, but for those who may not recall, you took over a 1-win program, and in your second year, you won the Big Ten regular season. So now this is your 3rd year, and you have won it twice. It's a pretty remarkable turnaround. I asked you this question last year, and we talked a lot about the portal and kind of the way that you had been able to turn over the roster. But now that you've done it twice here, kind of what's been the formula as you have turned what was kind of an also-ran program, at least in recent years, into arguably the biggest power in the league?
It's been the people. We have incredible players that we were very intentional in the recruiting process, that we recruited that resembled our non-negotiables as a coaching staff and as a program. They're incredibly committed to their craft, to being better every day, which requires an incredibly high work ethic and rate, while being inclusive to all that join. And that family atmosphere that I think so many coaches speak about is really hard to live, because there's also going to be moments where you have to deal with adversity, where you don't see eye to eye, but the respect and admiration you have for each other is going to help be that glue to keep coming back. And I think our players, there's an incredible amount of trust that our players give us, but I think they know that they get that from the coaching staff. They get honest feedback consistently. We see their ability. We talk about how they're continuing to grow and see that, throughout the course of the season. And that every day is the standard. And you got to be able to compete and perform at that level day in, day out. Recover, eat, sleep, wake up and do it all over again. And you have to be in love with this game to have the success that we've had, because it is a grind. And it's not just the season, but the off season. And this group has really just bought into all of those ideals. And, so much of the credit goes to that first group we inherited that had to give me blind trust, because I had 6 weeks to get to know them, get into our first season. And they did that. And that set us on the path for what we've been able to do these last 2 years with back-to-back titles.
We talked a little bit about your journey last year. You're from East Lansing, so you're coaching in your hometown. You, a decade ago, essentially, were the head coach at your alma mater, Alma College, tiny Division III school. You were mowing the grass, lining the fields, working in the recruiting office. I mean, everything. You have to wear every hat out there, working with the basketball team as well. You're a great basketball player in high school. When you think of where you've come in the last decade, what goes through your head?
I mean, it's still surreal. I still pull up to Jensen Fieldhouse where my office is, where, we're fortunate enough as a family to have season tickets growing up, watching games there, although I probably paid as much attention to painting on the glass block from the moisture in there as I did the games at that age. But been a Spartan fan my whole life. Our family has. I was never a good enough player to compete at this level. But I was fortunate for my opportunity at Alma College and learned so many great lessons that have just continued to hold true today. Athletics is such a powerful tool for teaching life's lessons and how to deal with adversity. And man, the memories and be able to come back here and be in East Lansing, it just really is. It's a surreal situation. And this community, not only having grown up in it, but now coming back to it after my time at Alma and at Grand Valley, really embodies family to us. as a Hosler household and as a coaching staff. And so blessed the fortunate way the soccer community's embraced us as a women's soccer program with the stands that continue to be filled at DeMartin as we were in top 10 attendance again this year. So incredible environment, the support's been phenomenal, and just a very surreal experience for us.
Coach's program has never won the conference tournament title. How much are you using that as motivation as you head into it?
Yeah, so different than last year. We're the co-champs. Nebraska is equally deserving with the season they've put together. Last year, obviously falling short in the final. Something that I still think about. I think this group still thinks about. We know that because we were there last year, that experience is going to help us. I think in the postseason, confidence comes from having those experiences. I think this group embodies that. We've got a very tough slate here in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, all 8 teams are incredible teams. We have to turn around and play Iowa again, who's incredibly well coached with some very talented roster. And, we think about last year often. That's clearly something we want to accomplish here in the next 2 weeks. And if you can add another trophy to the case in the same season with a double, that'd be truly remarkable.
Well, Jeff Hosler, best of luck. Can I book you for next October 24th? Are you going to be free?
I'd love to say it. I'll make sure I set an alert.
All right. Sounds good. We'll tentatively put it on the schedule. Jeff, congratulations on a great season. He was talking about the bracket there. Wisconsin is on top of the Big Ten West after rallying past Illinois Saturday. That, in conjunction with Iowa's loss to Minnesota, gave the Badgers a half-game lead over the Hawks. Though remember, Wisconsin faces Ohio State Saturday. Iowa has the tiebreaker, of course, between those two. Gophers and Nebraska are the other two with 2 conference losses. I want to get your guys' takes on this delightfully muddled mess.
Wow.
Let's start with the Badgers. It seemed like they were kind of on life support there on Saturday, but figured out a way, Pat, and now here they are, at least temporarily in first place. Again, the schedule includes that game with Ohio State, but how do you assess Wisconsin with a backup quarterback? How do you assess its chances of making it to Indy?
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin, like the rest of the division, once you think you got them figured out, you have to unfigure it out because something changes. And that was in the boat with looking at the scores against Illinois. They're coming off the disappointing loss to Iowa. Then they come back at the end, and, man, a couple of big drives. They're big for that team, big for Braden Locke, but big for Braylon Allen, too, who converted 4 first downs on those last 2 drives, 3 with runs, 1 with a pass. And that's got to be the way this team goes forward offensively. It's got to be a Braylon Allen-centric thing, at least until Tanner Mordecai comes back, if he comes back. And that's where their offensive identity probably should have been all along and certainly will be at this point. Defensively, piece it together. You're in this conference or in this division here where you're not playing great offenses. Ohio State's going to be a different level test. What you got to hope for here is you catch Ohio State in a bit of an emotional lull. Camp Randall can get wild. Have some plays go your way early and put some pressure on the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I agree. Braylon Allen, he's the second best back right now as far as yards and carries in the Big Ten. That has to be your lifeline for success. But I think last week's win, and the defense is kind of in the middle of the pack. They're doing fine, nothing dominant. But this was a great culture win for Luke Fickell. You always have those games where you kind of expect to win, and then you have a couple that, boy, this is a rivalry game. We were behind. We came back to win. A win like this for the program, for the players believing what the coaches have been preaching, and the coaches getting energized because of a win like this. This can carry a team the rest of the way. This is going to be a meaningful win than what they had last week against Illinois.
You saw the schedule is challenging there, not just the game against Ohio State, but also have to go to Minnesota. The Iowa battle is so interesting because, yes, Wisconsin is technically in first place right now, but Iowa does have the tiebreaker against them. They obviously would lose the tiebreaker to Minnesota. They have Rutgers at home. That's their lone remaining crossover. They have all kinds of offensive issues, as we are aware, but defense and special teams are fabulous. What are your thoughts on whether Iowa, who a week ago seemed to be in a really good spot, can kind of reclaim that?
I'm maybe it's me, and I, Deacon Hill, God bless him, he's doing everything he can. Let me say that up front. But when you turn the ball over, you can't play. And you get if you got anybody, a running back, a quarterback, a receiver at Iowa that turns the ball over, Kurt, don't play him. It's going to give your defense and your special teams no chance. And that's what happened last week. The thing that kind of took me back, the turnovers, absolutely, but the lack of running game. I mean, we sat here a week ago, and I was pounding the table saying they're averaging over 150 yards the last couple weeks leading into this game. And then you line up, and would they have 11 yards rushing or whatever it was? I mean, less than 20 yards for Kurt Ferentz and that offensive line. When you don't have a quarterback, that has to be where you lean. And a little bit like Wisconsin, and it didn't happen. I don't know. I'm nervous right now. I've got some concerns about this team. I don't know. And I picked them last week. God.
Pat?
You know what? Yeah, no. Coach, you're talking about don't play the guys who turn it over. I've got a suggestion for who you should play on offense.
Let me guess.
Cooper DeJean. Yeah. He's your best player. He's a playmaker. He makes something out of nothing. He's got interception returns for touchdowns. He's got punt returns for touchdowns. I saw Travis Hunter play 120-some snaps for Colorado going both ways. I'm not saying you have to ask him to do that, but you've got to. When your offense is absolutely starving for any way to move the ball, put your best player over there. Give him a package of plays, whether it's receiving, whether it's running reverses, pitches out of the backfield, whatever. Get him on the field on offense. That's my only thought there.
Well, you got a bye week to try to figure that out. They're dead last in the nation in total offense. DeJean was all over the field. In high school, played very small high school. But still, I mean, yeah.
Go Wildcat. Let's go Wildcat.
What do you have to lose?
Sure. There you go.
Try to get a little more dynamic there. The Gophers have the tiebreaker on Iowa, as I mentioned. They still have to go to Ohio State, though. What do you think of Minnesota suddenly in this discussion, Pat?
Well, hanging around, doing what they got to do. And, they survived maybe on a bit of a technicality on the punt return invalid fair catch signal, but that's the way it goes. And they're going to play games that are a matter of play here, play there. Can you make enough of them? They've got a solid running game. I mean, running against Iowa is tough for anybody, but they got a way to move the ball there. Kalikmanis is, can maybe make a few plays for you, but you're mostly just going to have to rely on a formula of running the ball, playing defense, field position. Just be comfortable playing those games, which I think they are, and hope it turns out where you're in it at the end and you make enough plays to end up on the right side of the scoreboard. So if you're Minnesota, look, you got spring in your step. You just won in Iowa City. You got the pig. You can move forward and say, hey, we've got a shot to win this division still.
Absolutely. PJ's got to be fired up. I mean, they were rowing the boat all the way through that game. The second half, they really won the game for them, 170-some yards to 12 or whatever it was. Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator, hats off to him at Minnesota. Early in the year, they were struggling on defense. They graduated some key guys from a year ago. We talked about them, a lot of them playing in the NFL. And it looks like Joe, as he always does, he's got that group again because it's a sophisticated defense. They're playing great defense, just like Pat said. I mean, they got to look at that schedule and say, the Northwestern loss, wow. What I mean? Think about it. When they look back on it, that's the one. If anything comes back to haunt them, it'll be that loss.
Really damaging, no doubt about it. You talk about that defense. They still have not had Cody Lindenberg out there all year, who is probably, at least on paper, one of their best defenders. Tyler Nubin probably the best, but Lindenberg is certainly in that conversation. You got Chris Ottman-Bell back for like a play.
Yep.
Darius Taylor did play in that game, and so they're maybe getting a little bit healthier.
I think they are.
Yeah, so that's optimistic. Nebraska has to be in this conversation as well. They only have 2 conference losses. What do you think of the Huskers, who are getting better here, Wanny?
You're leading the Big Ten in rushing, and you got a defense that makes plays like they do. You're going to have a chance every week. And Matt Rule's been there. You got a coach now that's new, and the kids are buying in, but he's been in these games before. Do not underestimate Matt Rule.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, run the ball, stop the run. They're great on the run defense, and Heinrich Harburg has given you what you wanted out of that position, a dual threat When he runs the ball for 70 or more yards, scores a touchdown, they win. He's been a solid replacement for Jeff Sims. Don't count him out. They've got a chance to go to a bowl game for the first time in a long time at the very least, and they're not out of contention for the division.
Yeah, it's amazing. They have the longest bowl drought in the Power Five. I mean, the fact that that is Nebraska would have seemed so unfathomable even a decade ago, but here we are. And of course, the Huskers, they still have Wisconsin and Iowa on their schedule. So to a certain extent, their fate is at least somewhat controlled in their own hands. So that's the West for now. We'll revisit it next week.
Talk to him that loud! What's the best thing about Go 7-0? Let's go 8-0! Oh, I see you across the field in Ohio State. Stand there and perforate with the body. Say, rah, 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 hit the front, it's gotta go. Never let that team get the ball. Hail, hail, the gang's all here, son, we're not conference now. Woo!
It is time for Coach Speak, and pleased to have Ryan Day, the Ohio State head coach, with us. We got a good look at the Buckeyes celebrating in the locker room after the win over Penn State. Coach, really appreciate your time. What are you proudest of coming out of that win, aside from obviously your players' musical talents?
Right. I would say the fact that, in a matchup game, you got to find a way to win. And that's our second top 10 win in the first 7 games of the year. I think the overall passion that we played with, I thought the environment was electric. I thought our guys played tough, and was able to win the game in the second half. And, are there things that we, feel like we can grow upon here as we head into the back half of the season? Absolutely. I think that's probably what's most exciting about where we're at right now. But, in a big stage and a big moment, a lot of guys stepped up.
What are some of those things that you're prioritizing as you head into the back half?
Well, you want to identify the things that you want to enhance, the things that are going well that you got to continue to get better at as you start to, put more and more film out there. And then the areas that you got to improve on. And, there are certainly areas that we got to improve on. I'm probably not going to get into, those specifically right now,
okay.
but that's part of coming in on a Sunday and identifying the things you got to get better at, because the issues are always there. Whether you win or lose, they're not going away. And so some things we got to get fixed, some things we got to continue to enhance.
Well, one of the stories to me from this team this year has been your defense. And we talked a lot about it when Jerry and Howard and I were there for camp about how could you kind of get away from the big plays you gave up at the end of last year. You're one of 3 teams in the country that still hasn't given up a play longer than 40 yards. And particularly given how young you are on offense, it's a few key positions, and frankly, how banged up you have been. What does it say about this program and where it is that you could slightly alter your identity, maybe lead with a different side of the ball than you've led with before, and still be here considered among the very elite programs in the country?
I thought we made a lot of progress last season, but certainly learned a lot as we got into the end of the season. And, I think when you put in a new system, the first year you're learning what to do. In year 2, you're learning how to do it. And I also think Jim has done a really good job in the offseason of adapting to the conference and our players. The way that he defended teams at Oklahoma State is a lot different than what way we look now. I think that says a lot about him being able to identify that and put our guys in really good situations. But I also think it's our players. We have a much more veteran group. And like you said, we've recruited good depth. So even though we were down a guy or 2, other guys were able to step up in big moments, in a top 10 matchup like that, and not small stages by any means. So if we can continue to build in all 3 phases, then, we'll be a tough team to beat.
Right. I made the comment earlier, I give you a lot of credit because as a play caller, play callers want to score touchdowns. And, defensive guys obviously trying to stop them. But as a head coach, a lot of head coaches that call plays and oversee the offense, they don't get the big picture. In that game against Penn State, when your defense was playing good, and you came back and ran the ball, 40 times in the game? That tells me that, hey, Ryan Day gets the big picture. You understand what it takes for our team to win. And a little bit like River said, your offense is young. You've had some injuries. But your win margin, I was looking at this morning because the perception is, oh, God, the offense, I mean, your win margin is the same as what it was really a year ago. 10, 12, 14 points a game. You're just doing it a little bit differently. But from in the locker room, is there a different vibe in the players, or are they just oblivious to this, just trying to win? Is there a different feeling in the locker room with your defense playing so good?
I think the biggest difference is just the confidence that our defense is playing with. And so the number one goal is to win the game. I mean, that's it. It doesn't matter how. And I felt like there was a point where we were in control on defense. And I felt like if we could, shorten the game and, run the ball, that, we were going to win it. I didn't think we needed to score a whole bunch of points. Now, calling the plays, yeah, you want to score 40 points. And watching the film, I mean, I got sick. The fact that we didn't get in on that red zone area, or we get down to the 2-yard line, don't get in on 3rd and 4th down. Some other areas that we just, a couple penalties here and there, just not good enough. But I think that is also encouraging because I know that we can. I mean, I've seen it on film. We've got to do a better job of it. But the potential here, is great. And the number one goal, like you said, though, is to win. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is just the overall confidence our guys have on defense, knowing that we can win the game on defense.
Hey, Ryan, tell us a little bit about Kyle McCord, because obviously he's new in that role. But I don't think he gets enough credit. I mean, 12 touchdowns to 1 interception. I mean, beating 2 top 10 teams. Guys, some of his main guys being hurt. We talked about that. Tell us a little bit about his personality going forward. I mean, how does he fit into this compared to some of the guys you had in the past?
Yeah, Kyle's been here for a couple years now, so he knew the system coming in, and I think that's probably the biggest difference. And he knows what big-time football looks like. He knows what it's like to go on a road and play games. He knows what has to happen in big games. He knows situational football. He knows the offense. So that I think has allowed him to grow quickly from where he started at the beginning of the year. And I watch him grow every day, and I believe there's a lot of great football ahead of him. I don't think we've seen the best out of him yet. I think he's, his confidence is building and growing as he starts to get these wins under his belt. He's got really good weapons. We're looking forward to having a couple more back this week, and we could be, operating at full capacity. But he's got to keep growing. He's got to keep building. He's got to enhance the things he's done well. We're going to challenge him in the areas that we know he can get better at. And I know he's going to respond really well, because if he can do that, again, I think our offense, again, can be as explosive as it's ever been.
Hey, Rod, just off the football track a little bit, you know that your Uncle John and I were running buddies in Naples. I know you know that. I'm sitting there watching the game with Norv Turner, the ex-Charger coach, Washington coach, and Norv turns to me and says, boy, at the end when you won the game and everybody's fired up, and Norv says, I'll bet you Ryan's thinking, boy, it'd be nice to be on Lake Winnipesaukee right now.
That would be, yeah, that's exactly right, especially this time of year. Yeah, it'd be nice.
And
to
you know what he asked me? He
get on the pontoon.
I told him.
Have a beer or two.
Yeah, and then he asked me, and I've been up there with him, as you know, on the lake, and he said, make sure you ask Ryan if he knows if he's ever been to Ware Beach, is it? Ware Beach?
Oh, I've been to Weir's Beach before, that's for sure, yeah. I definitely have been to Weir's Beach. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Go ahead, Rever.
Yeah, Coach, I wanted to ask you about Marvin. I think that maybe more so than any player coming out of this weekend, there was probably the most buzz about him. And again, like we've been watching this for several years now and know how fabulous he is. But when you shine like that on a big stage, you start to get a little bit more of that buzz. People are talking Heisman with him. State the case for Marvin for the Heisman. It's become largely a quarterback award. As we know, we have seen an occasional receiver, running back win it. But make the case here for why Marvin should be in that discussion.
Well, I think the award should be given to the most outstanding football player in the nation. And statistics matter, but ultimately it comes down to who's the best player in the country. And you're looking at a guy who garners a lot of attention week in and week out. He's played big in big games. He's, to me, the most outstanding player in the country. You just watch the way he goes about his business, his work ethic, his talent. He's clutch. I mean, he can do so many different things. And so, I just think, he solidified himself as one of the best players in the country this past week. And as he continues to produce on the field, I think he should be in consideration for the Heisman.
Let's talk about your opponent this week, Wisconsin. They are in a bit of a flux just in that they have a new staff, and obviously the quarterback, Tanner Mordecai, is out. What have you seen as you watch them on tape and as you prepare to go to Camp Randall, which, as you well know, is a challenging place to play?
Yeah, that's the first thing is we haven't been there before. I haven't been there before. This team hasn't been there before. So it's been 7 years, and, but we know it's a really hostile environment. Halloween weekend, night game. I mean, it'll be rocking. And they had a big win last week. Luke does a great job and always has. And so they're well coached, and it's going to be a battle. This is playing on the road this time of year in the Big Ten. And so we've got to play our best. And we knew when we looked at the schedule, this is one of those games that we were going to get challenged in a big way. So it all starts with how we practice this week and then playing well and handling the environment when we get there.
Lots of ties between their program and yours. You mentioned Luke Fickell. He's the most obvious one. How do you think some of that stuff plays into the mindset coming into a game like this?
Well, it comes down to the players. This is a players' game, and they do have a lot of ties to Ohio and Ohio State, and they're really good coaches. They do a great job, and former players. There's a bunch of those guys that are on the staff there, and so they have that opportunity because they were good players and certainly now become great coaches. But this comes down to the players on the field, but it's our job as coaches to put them in the best situation to be successful.
Little extra incentive against the alma mater.
Yeah.
You know that. Speaking of which, I saw New Hampshire on the schedule for 2027. Ryan, I mean, they're 2-1 all time against the Big Ten. Do you know what you're getting into here?
I do. A lot of pride in being a Wildcat from New Hampshire, which is not far from Lake Winnipesaukee, Coach. But yeah, a lot of pride in the hometown, so that'll be exciting.
All right, it all comes back to Lake Winnipesaukee. We all know that. Ryan Day, thanks so much. Really appreciate you spending some time with us on a game week. Thanks a lot.
Have a good week, guys. Thanks.
Time for Wanny's Winner of the Week, singling out one team every Tuesday. Who are you going with this week?
I am going with the Wisconsin Badgers. And I tell you why. Luke Fickell, at this stage of the game, first year, you're trying to build a foundation, trying to build the culture. And without your starting quarterback in the game, and you can come back and be down 18-0 and outscore them in the second half, to me, that's a great win. That's a great believer win for the players and the program going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And they head into this game now against Ohio State with some momentum. And remember, 2 of the last 3 times an AP Top 10 teams come to Camp Randall, Wisconsin's knocked them off. So we shall see. The beauty of having Pat here is we get multiple winners of the week. So, Pat, we'll give you the final word here. Who are you going with?
How about Rutgers? State University of New Jersey, 6 wins, most in 9 years, and it's still October. Bowl eligible in October. Defense, Kyle Monangai, Greg Schiano chopping that wood, getting it done. This has been a nice turnaround season for them. Kudos to the Scarlet Knights for what they've done. And again, they may not be done winning yet. The rest of the schedule's challenging, but I bet they win more than 6 before the end of the regular season.
So you did not talk about Greg Schiano here, and he picked up the slack.
I gave Pat the privilege as a guest on our show to take who he wants. You thought I was going to take Schiano.
I thought for sure. It was the most obvious call of all time.
Well,
and
I
yet,
gave Pat the option.
That's what makes you unpredictable.
Schiano's
right?
not done. Pat said it. He's not done.
Yeah.
I'll get a chance to talk about him again.
You don't blitz when they're expecting the blitz. All right, great stuff, Pat. Thanks so much. Braylon Allen on the show tomorrow. We'll see you then.